TK opened the door and shot him.
Bruh, this girl done snitched on Tay-K, and with evidence already piling high in front of him, Tay-K is probably never coming out of jail again. But why now after so many years? No way out. The clock's officially ticking down on Tay-K's freedom, and this time, there ain't no ankle monitor to cut. On day 5 of his second murder trial in Bexar County, the prosecution dropped their nuclear bomb a former girlfriend who took the stand and pointed the finger directly at him, telling jurors she watched him pull the trigger that killed photographer Mark Saldivar outside of Chick-fil-A in 2017.
TK opened the door and shot him.
8 simple words that likely sealed his fate. Joanna Reyes crying on the witness stand while detailing how Tay-K, born Tamor McIntyre, turned what was supposed to be a photography session into a deadly robbery. The testimony left spectators in the courtroom stunned as Reyes methodically broke down how the situation escalated from a planned photo shoot to a fatal shooting.
Joanna Reyes, in tears and in her own words, described to jurors how a day that started as a planned photo shoot turned deadly. Reyes says at the time Tamor McIntyre referred to her as his girlfriend and had asked her help in finding a photographer. She knew Mark Saldivar through Instagram and reached out to him for his help. She picked him up along with McIntyre and his friends Jalen Bell and Jeremiah Rodriguez, all in the same car. Saldivar asked if he could reschedule and if they could give him a ride to North Star Mall, which she agreed. But then she says everything took a turn.
For a young rapper already serving 55 years for the 2016 murder of Ethan Walker, this testimony doesn't just paint him into a corner, it bricks up the walls and throws away the key. Already looking at eligibility for parole only after 27.5 years on his first sentence, a conviction in this second murder case would likely mean life without the possibility of parole. At just 24 years old, Tay-K is staring down a reality where he'll never breathe free air again. What's particularly damaging about Reyes' testimony is how specific and detailed it was. She didn't just place Tay-K at the scene. She described exactly how he allegedly initiated the robbery that escalated to murder.
We hit the light at McCullough, and Tamor took out his gun and pointed it at Mark and asked for his bag. Mark refused to give him the bag, so they all started hitting him.
Even more disturbing was her account of what happened immediately after the shooting. According to Reyes, Tay-K's friend Jalen Bell actually celebrated the murder.
Jalen applauded him and gave him a high five, and they high-fived each other. And Jalen said he caught your first body.
Caught your first body, the type of cold statement that's hard for any jury to forget, painting Tay-K not as a bystander or minor participant, but as the principal actor who pulled the trigger and took a life. Of course, Reyes had plenty of motivation to talk. She copped a sweet plea deal, 10 years probation on a reduced charge of tampering with evidence in exchange for her testimony. As the defense will surely argue, she's essentially trading Tay-K's freedom for her own.
Reyes says she was in fear to reach out to police after the shooting because she says McIntyre threatened to kill her and her family. As for the backpack with Saldivar's things, she said that Bell and McIntyre took off with it. Reyes was offered a plea deal in exchange for her testimony for 10 years probation on the lesser charge of tampering with evidence, which the defense says is a big reason why she said what she said on the stand today.
But here's the thing, even if the jury takes her testimony with a grain of salt due to the plea deal, Reyes was there. She wasn't recounting hearsay or secondhand information. She was describing events she claims to have witnessed personally, adding a level of credibility that's difficult to completely discount. For those who've been following Tay-K's story since he first blew up with The Race in 2017, this development is just the latest chapter in what's been one of the wildest sagas in recent hip-hop history. When he dropped that track while on the run, posing next to his own wanted poster and boasting about cutting his ankle monitor, nobody could have predicted how definitively his story would be concluding. Looking back, Tay-K's decision to reject a plea deal for this second murder charge in February 2024 now seems almost unimaginably reckless. Whatever terms the prosecution offered then, they almost certainly wouldn't have been as severe as the life without parole he now potentially faces after Reyes' damning testimony. The fundamental tragedy of Tay-K's story is how young he was when his life effectively ended. He was just 16 when he participated in the home invasion that resulted in Ethan Walker's death. After being placed on house arrest, he cut off his ankle monitor at 17 and went on the run, allegedly committing the second murder during this period. By the time U.S. Marshals caught up with him in New Jersey on June 30th, 2017, his fate was already largely sealed, though few realized how completely at the time. A talent lost to the streets. before he became inmate #170074748. Tamor McIntyre was a kid with undeniable musical talent. His distinctive flow, raspy voice, and raw lyrical content helped The Race reach #44 on Billboard and go platinum, all while he was a fugitive on the run from murder charges. Even now, with Tay K serving decade one of what's looking increasingly like a lifetime behind bars, he maintains nearly 3 million monthly listeners on Spotify. This paradox artistic success while incarcerated, fame achieved through infamy, highlights the tragic what if at the center of Tay K's story. What might have become of his career if he channeled his energy exclusively into music rather than the streets? His uncle believes he could have been among the biggest names in hip-hop.
I think he would have been a good soldier. Because he likes the contact, he likes the tactical stuff. He's very intelligent. He's very smart. He's very articulate. I don't know what people or what social media think of him, but he's a smart kid. If he was able to do that at 14, 15, imagine now, Imagine. So if you take that time capsule away and that never happened, how far would he be right now in the music industry? He came out with the Playboy Cardis, the XXXTentacion. He was the leader of that SoundCloud. So imagine now what he'll be probably, and I mean, this, like I said, there's no hit to anybody else, but he'll probably be leading a young school like NBA Youngboy, probably way above that situation. Lil Durk, probably with young Lil Baby, all them. He'll be up there with them. You know what I'm saying? Because I saw his talent. I hear his music. I hear his unreleased. I talk to him. He reads. He's getting into a mode of more maturity. So it's like, I just, I pray for him every day, and I pray for his mentor, and I pray for my sister, so, one day they can reunite.
But to understand how a promising young artist ended up facing life without parole at 24, we need to look at the environment that shaped him. Born in Long Beach, California on June 16, 2000, to parents involved in gang life, Tay K's childhood was marked by instability and exposure to criminality from day one.
Both of his parents were gang members, and even though his dad was always in and out of prison, his mom was still active with the Baby Insane Crips, while raising the two kids, him and his sister Kayla. But things really took a turn for the worse when his dad was doing a 7-year run in prison for a deal gone bad in 2002. Without a father figure around, it was hard for him to find guidance. Eventually, their mom was unable to raise them, and they soon found themselves in the foster care system, bouncing around from different families who ultimately didn't want them.
This unstable foundation, parents in gangs, time in foster care, and later an allegedly abusive father after his release from prison, created the conditions where criminal behavior seemed like a viable path. By 14-15, Tay K was already deeply involved in the street life while simultaneously pursuing music with his group, the Daytona Boys. The first major incident that foreshadowed his eventual downfall came on New Year's Day 2016, when his Daytona Boys colleague Santana Sage shot and killed college student Sarah Mushlanger during a traffic altercation. While Tay K was in the car, he faced no charges as a minor. Santana Sage, however, received 44 years for the murder. Just 6 months later came the home invasion that would change everything. In July 2016, 16-year-old Tay K participated in a robbery in Mansfield, Texas, that resulted in the murder of 21-year-old Ethan Walker. Though Tay K wasn't the shooter, under Texas law's party to offense doctrine, his participation in the robbery made him equally guilty of the murder that resulted. After being placed on house arrest while awaiting trial, Tay K made what would prove to be a fatally bad decision, cutting off his ankle monitor and going on the run. It was during this 3-month period as a fugitive that he allegedly committed the second murder shooting photographer Mark Saldivar during a robbery attempt and recorded The Race, which would ironically become his biggest hit. By the time U.S. Marshals captured him in June 2017, Tay K had cemented his place in hip-hop lore, not just for his music, but for the audacity of flaunting his fugitive status in real time on social media and in his lyrics. The story captured the public imagination, with The Race going viral and eventually being certified platinum. But now, 7 years later, as his second murder trial unfolds with damning testimony from his ex-girlfriend placing him as the trigger man in Saldivar's death, the full cost of those choices is becoming clear. The talented kid who might have been one of the biggest names in hip-hop is instead likely to spend the rest of his life in prison, his potential forever unrealized. Fans on social media continue to debate his legacy, with some focusing on the quality of his music, while others emphasize the gravity of his alleged crimes. One ex-user wrote, "The most unfortunate part about all of this is if you listen to that Santana world, Tay K had immense rap talent and energy, but for some reason he felt he actually needed to hurt and murder people. Sad story." Another user described him as a generational talent, whose catalog of just a handful of songs still managed to make a significant impact on hip-hop, leaving fans to wonder what might have been. These perspectives reflect the complicated emotions that Tay K's case evokes: recognition of genuine artistic talent, sadness at its waist, and acknowledgement of the serious harm caused by his alleged actions. The tragedy extends beyond just Tay K himself to include his victims and their families, as well as the broader cultural implications of his story. For young artists coming up in hip-hop today, Tay K's trajectory offers a stark warning about the consequences of blurring the line between artistic persona and criminal activity. While hip-hop has a long tradition of artists drawing from street experiences, Tay K's case represents an extreme where the art didn't just reflect criminality, but was created in its midst, recorded while actively fleeing murder charges, with lyrics literally describing his fugitive status. During his incarceration, Tay K has reportedly shown signs of growth and maturity. His uncle mentioned that he's been reading and developing intellectually. But with Joanna Reyes' testimony now on record describing him as the shooter in Saldivar's murder, any hope that this maturation might eventually lead to freedom seems increasingly remote. As Charleston White, not typically known for sympathy toward young offenders, surprisingly noted, he was a kid with an undeveloped brain that's been trying to mask and deal with and process his childhood trauma. He was a kid, homie, and he f***ed up. It cost somebody their life, but he don't deserve 55 years for what he got 55 years for the first charge. Whether or not one agrees with White's assessment of the appropriate sentence, the observation about Tay K's youth and developmental stage at the time of his crimes raises important questions about juvenile justice in America. At 16, his brain was still developing, particularly the prefrontal cortex responsible for impulse control and decision-making. This biological reality doesn't excuse criminal behavior, but does complicate straightforward notions of culpability and appropriate punishment. The system closes in. As Tay K sits in the Bexar County courtroom watching his former girlfriend detail how he allegedly shot and killed Mark Saldivar, he's experiencing the culmination of a process that began years ago. The criminal justice system methodically, inexorably closing in around him. It started with his arrest for the 2016 home invasion, continued through his flight, recapture, and first murder conviction, and is now approaching its final chapter with this second murder trial. At each stage, the system has tightened its grip, reducing his options and increasing the severity of his predicament. When Joanna Reyes took the stand on day 5 of the trial, her testimony represented perhaps the most devastating blow yet to Tay K's diminishing hopes. As his former girlfriend and the driver of the vehicle during the alleged robbery and murder, her account carries particular weight.
Joanna Reyes, in tears and in her own words, described to jurors how a day that started as a planned photo shoot turned deadly. Reyes says at the time Tamor McIntyre referred to her as his girlfriend and had asked her help in finding a photographer. She knew Mark Saldivar through Instagram and reached out to him for his help. She picked him up along with McIntyre and his friends Jalen Bell and Jeremiah Rodriguez, all in the same car. Saldivar asked if he could reschedule and if they could give him a ride to North Star Mall, which she agreed. But then she says everything took a turn.
Her detailed account of the robbery attempt and subsequent shooting leaves little room for Tay K's defense team to maneuver.
We hit the light at McCullough, and Tamor took out his gun and pointed it at Mark and asked for his bag. Mark refused to give him the bag, so they all started hitting him.
Most damning of all was her description of Tay K as the shooter and the disturbing celebration that allegedly followed.
Jalen applauded him and gave him a high five, and they high-fived each other. And Jalen said he caught your first body.
Of course, Reyes' testimony must be viewed in the context of the plea deal she received. 10 years probation on a reduced charge of tampering with evidence, rather than facing potential charges as an accomplice to capital murder. This arrangement gives her obvious motivation to provide testimony that pleases the prosecution.
Reyes says she was in fear to reach out to police after the shooting because she says McIntyre threatened to kill her and her family. As for the backpack with Saldivar's thing, she said that Bell and McIntyre took off with it. Reyes was offered a plea deal in exchange for her testimony for 10 years probation on the lesser charge of tampering with evidence, which the defense says is a big reason why she said what she said on the stand today.
But even with these credibility issues, her testimony represents a significant challenge for Tay K's defense. She was present at the scene, she had a relationship with the defendant, and she provided specific details about the crime that would be difficult to fabricate convincingly. This pattern of co-defendants turning on Tay K in exchange for leniency has been a recurring theme in his legal saga. In his first murder case from 2016, we saw the same dynamic, with some defendants receiving dramatically lighter sentences in exchange for cooperation. Most notably, a female co-defendant in the Walker murder case received only probation, while Tay K got 55 years, despite neither being the shooter.
But here's where it starts to get wickeder. You remember little white girl from earlier? Tay K's lawyer brings up the fact that she got 20 years, which was changed to 10 months probation. His lawyer said, what's the difference between the two of them? In this case, you have two 16-year-olds that didn't anybody. In fact, she planned the whole thing. So technically, he shouldn't get more time, right? The judge said, that does sound fair, but technically, this is Texas. 55 years.
For Tay-K, who rejected a plea deal for this second murder charge in February 2024, the decision to gamble on a trial now looks increasingly misguided. Whatever terms the prosecution offered then, they almost certainly wouldn't have been as severe as the life without parole he now potentially faces. His legal team must now attempt to discredit Reyes's testimony, focusing on her plea deal and suggesting her account can't be trusted. They'll likely emphasize inconsistencies in her story, if any can be found, and argue that she's simply saying what the prosecution wants to hear in order to secure her own freedom. But even if they successfully cast some doubt on her credibility, the cumulative weight of evidence against Tay-K, including his flight from justice after the first murder charge, his capture after 3 months on the run, and now this eyewitness testimony, presents a formidable challenge. The more likely outcome, barring some unexpected development, is a conviction that would effectively guarantee he never experiences freedom again. For someone who's already spent most of his adult life behind bars, this reality is particularly harsh. Tay-K has been incarcerated since age 17. He's now 24, meaning he's spent more of his adult life in prison than out of it. The formative experiences most young people have in their late teens and early 20s, education, career development, relationships, independence, have all been replaced for him by the structured monotony of prison life. The charges he faces are undeniably serious, and if he committed the crimes as alleged, there must be accountability. But the extent of that accountability, potentially spending the next 60+ years in prison until death, raises profound questions about justice, rehabilitation, and the purpose of incarceration, particularly for crimes committed by juveniles. Tay-K's uncle touched on this, suggesting that racial bias plays a role in how the Texas justice system has treated his nephew.
He was just there. He was a minor there. You know, he was influence heavy. You know, we all know that he didn't pull that trigger. So I think the guy who did got 20 years, and then my nephew got 55 because I think it was the mockery of the judicial system.
Right.
You know, the song he made, and I remember what the judge told him when I was there when he first got here. So it's like I knew why that judge, you know, he felt that way because you know Texas is hard on their criminals, especially African American. So I believe that if that stuff happened in California, he would have been out already. But in Texas is different.
While this perspective spoke to his first murder case where he wasn't the shooter, the second case presents different circumstances if Reyes's testimony is believed. If Tay-K directly and deliberately took a life, as she alleges, the case for leniency becomes much more difficult to make, regardless of his age at the time or any systemic disparities in the justice system. As the trial continues, the walls are closing in on Tay-K in ways that suggest there will be no last-minute escape, no dramatic twist that saves him from a lifetime behind bars. The system that began processing him at 16 is nearing the completion of its work, the transformation of a troubled teenager into a permanent inmate. For his fans, who continue to stream his music and debate his legacy online, this reality is difficult to reconcile with the charismatic, talented artist they connected with through songs like The Race. With nearly 3 million monthly listeners, still on Spotify, his cultural impact continues, even as his personal freedom appears to be ending permanently. A life sentence without parole would make Tay-K another entry in a troubling statistic. The United States has approximately 53% of the world's juvenile offenders serving life without parole. For a crime allegedly committed at 17, he would face a punishment that many countries reserve only for the most heinous adult offenders, if they permit it at all. Click the video on your screen for more like this.